Hi, Mom. What are you doing today?
Providence Place, owned by the Sisters of Providence, an ideal rental setting for retirees to continue their active, independent lifestyles. We have bright 1- and 2-bedroom apartments, a magnificent chapel with daily mass, restaurant-style dining, and wellness and entertainment programs. Call for a tour, 413-534-9700.
Mom, call me when you're not so busy.
Coming up on this edition of Real to Real, the Pope releases an encyclical calling all to practice love, mercy, and forgiveness.
The diocese is asking for input through an online survey on its response to sexual abuse allegations. I'm Caroline McGrath. I'll have that story coming up.
And my dad, Jimmy Stefanik, is back with a recipe straight out of his garden. These stories and more are coming your way next on Real to Real. Hello and welcome to Real to Real. Last weekend on the Feast of St. Francis, Pope Francis signed his latest encyclical Fratelli Tutti, which means all brothers and sisters. Going to Assisi, where St. Francis was called by God centuries ago to sign this important writing. An encyclical is the most important level of documents written by a pope, and in this one, Pope Francis examines a number of worldwide social ills, bringing in the parable of the Good Samaritan and calling all to practice love, mercy, and forgiveness. We learn more now in this Catholic News Service story.
Adesso firmerò l'enciclica.
After celebrating Mass at the tomb of St. Francis in Assisi, October 3rd, Pope Francis signed his much-anticipated encyclical on human fraternity. The document, called Fratelli Tutti, on fraternity and social friendship, looks in depth at Catholic social teaching and applies its principles to the contemporary world, particularly given the coronavirus pandemic and other recent world crises. The document urges Christians and all people of goodwill to recognize the equal dignity of all people and to work together to build a world where people love and care for one another as brothers and sisters. As the encyclical was being released to the public October 4th, the Pope said,
I segni dei tempi mostrano chiaramente che la fraternità umana e la cura del creato formano l'unica via verso lo sviluppo integrale e la pace, già indicata dai santi papi Giovanni XXIII, Paolo VI e Giovanni Paolo II.
The encyclical letter Fratelli Tutti is about love and attention, the kind of attention and tenderness that brings a broken and bleeding world back to health. It is a social meditation on the Good Samaritan who recognizes love and attention as the preeminent law and models for us creative social friendship. Pope Francis asks us to gaze at the world similarly, such that we come to see the basic, indispensable relation of all things and all people, near and far. In its simplicity of call, Fratelli Tutti is a devastating challenge to our ecological, political, economic, and social life. But above all, it is a proclamation of an ineradicable, joyful truth presented here as a wellspring for a fatigued world.
And joining me now is Father Warren Savage, Director and Catholic Chaplain of the Interfaith Center at Westfield State University, to unpack this 92-page document. Hello, Father. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hello, Sharon. It's great to be with you today.
Now, first of all, this is a timely document, given what we're facing in this world, from a pandemic to social injustices to environmental crises. What do you think the Pope ultimately wants to say here?
I believe that the Pope's encyclical on fraternity and social friendship is a deep expression of faith in a time of doubt and uncertainty, a call to hope in a time of doubt and despair, but above all, a challenge to love in a time of social conflict, racial discord, and political polarization.
Now, the average Catholic person in the pew may be overwhelmed with the word encyclical, even intimidated. Of course, they can read its entirety, but what is your takeaway from this, and maybe what everyday Catholics should be doing or continuing to do?
Well, I think Catholics today would understand the Pope's encyclical in light of the readings that we hear on Sunday from St. Paul's letters. These are like pastoral letters that are sent to communities that are being challenged to live their faith, to examine their hearts and minds. And I think above all, this letter does exactly what St. Paul's letters do in terms of calling Christian communities to deeper faith and action, and above all, to live in the image and likeness of Christ. So on the local level, it would be important for them to read the parable of the Good Samaritan, which is the core of the document. And that's found in Luke's Gospel, chapter 10, verses 25 through 37. It would be good for all the parishes to study that gospel, to reflect on it, and to use it as a lens to respond to the global pandemic, the economic injustices and inequalities in our world. But above all, it calls us to be a people of love and compassion and mercy, which is the heart of this encyclical letter.
All right, Father Warren Savage, you always have a good message for everyone, and we really appreciate your insight today.
Thank you.
And if you would like to read Pope Francis' encyclical Fratelli Tutti in its entirety, we have a link at iobserve.org. Even before the release of the Judge Vilas report, finding credible allegations of sexual abuse against the late Bishop Christopher J. Weldon, the Diocese of Springfield had begun to implement policies on how to investigate, report, and help victims of sexual abuse. One component that has been established is the formation of the Independent Task Force on the Response to Sexual Abuse, which is looking at ways the diocese can ensure victims are heard and cared for and children are protected. Part of the fact-finding will come from an online survey providing insight from Catholics throughout the diocese. Carolee McGrath went to a recent task force meeting and explains.
Members of the Independent Task Force on the Response to Sexual Abuse met on a recent afternoon. Their mission to advise the Apostolic Administrator of Springfield, Bishop Robert McManus of Worcester, with steps for improvement in handling sexual abuse allegations. The task force was created before the Judge Vilas report was released in June by then Bishop Mitchell Rosansky, who is now the Archbishop of St. Louis. In his investigation, Judge Peter Vilas, a retired Superior Court judge, found allegations of sexual abuse against former Springfield Bishop Christopher Weldon to be credible. The allegations dated back to the 1960s. The task force will be informed by the Vilas report, but will also seek input from sexual abuse survivors themselves and from the wider Catholic community through an online survey. Retired Superior Court Judge Daniel Ford is the Independent Task Force chair.
I was a judge for 30 years. I personally observed the trauma of sexual abuse on children. I never had a case involving a priest, but I had a lot of cases involving other people in positions of authority. And I saw what it can do to a young adult or to a child. And of course, I'm aware of the criticism the church has endured over the years. If I can do anything to make things better, to improve the process, I want to be involved in doing it. I thought it's a crucial step toward healing and toward restoring faith in our church.
The online questionnaire, a survey on the response to sexual abuse within the Diocese of Springfield, is available on diospringfield.org. It asks participants their view of how the diocese is handling allegations of abuse and how the diocese is working to protect children and vulnerable adults. Jeffrey Trant is the director of the Diocesan Office of Safe Environment and Victim Assistance.
The survey is so important because as the diocese is developing a strategic plan, it is really critical that we give an invitation to our key stakeholders to be able to give input into the development in the planning process. And the survey is just one way that we're going to invite stakeholders to be able to give their input into that process.
In addition to Judge Ford, other task force members include Vice Chair Irene Woods, founding executive director of the Children's Advocacy Center of Franklin County and the North Quabbin, Orlando Izaza, Ronald Johnson, Father Michael Piers, Sister of St. Joseph Mary Quinn, James Stankiewicz, Joan Tabashnik, Father William Torigny, and Amber Zini. In addition, Maurice Bovair of Shrewsbury, a licensed independent clinical social worker, will serve as a planning consultant to the task force.
Because of my faith, I thought, gee, this might be a natural place for me to be at, because this is about the uplifting of God's kingdom.
Task Force member Ron Johnson is the president and CEO of Martin Luther King Jr. Family Services in Springfield, a faith-based organization that serves 700 people per week. And it's a difficult call, right?
It is not. That's right. This is not an easy call. You know, the issues are very, very serious. They have ramifications in terms of decisions that will be made and the actions going forward. So I take it very seriously.
The task force will look for improvement in the following areas: acknowledging the trauma of sexual abuse on members of the community and ensuring the allocation of resources needed to promote healing of survivors and the faith community; responding to all allegations of sexual abuse in a timely, compassionate, and fair way; ensuring the diocese has a transparent system of protocols and procedures that guarantee respect and due process for all involved; ensuring that local church leadership is held responsible and accountable for failing to protect children and other vulnerable persons; holding those who have been credibly accused of sexual abuse responsible and accountable; and preventing sexual abuse of anyone in faith communities in the future. The work of the task force is the latest action taken by the diocese to improve its safe environment efforts. Last year, in 2019, Jeffrey Trant was hired as the director of the Office of Safe Environment and Victim Assistance. Under his direction, he commissioned the Judge Vilas report, hired new investigators, and entered into a memorandum of understanding with the 3 district attorneys in Western Massachusetts. In addition, for years, the diocese has mandated child abuse prevention training for priests, religious, staff, and volunteers. They also require criminal background checks. Sharon Doty is the founder of Keeping Them Safe, a national consulting firm which focuses on child abuse prevention. She's also a Catholic, a mother and grandmother, and consults the independent task force. She says parents need to understand that predators, no matter where they work, groom their victims.
Predators, child molesters, allow children to do things their parents wouldn't let them do. Now, when I ask a room full of adults, what is that? They talk about drugs and alcohol and smoking, and that's listen, that's definitely there. It's just not what is usually happening. What's usually happening is parents say you can only have healthy snacks after school, and the predator has cookies and candy and muffins and things, and they're saying, well, it'll just be our secret. Don't tell mom and dad, because they're cultivating an environment of secrecy that separates the child from their parent.
And Carolee McGrath joins us now. Hi, Carolee.
Hi, Sharon. Thank you for having me.
It seems like the effort will result in improved policies and procedures to ensure our Catholic community is a safer environment. What are some of the protocols already in place to protect against sexual abuse?
Well, each parish already has a child advocate which coordinates the Virtues Training Program or the Protecting God's Children Training Program, which is geared towards volunteers, priests, religious, anybody who works with children or vulnerable adults and teaches them the correct protocols to keep everybody safe. In addition, the diocese has a Circle of Grace program, which is geared toward children, which is taught in faith formation programs. And to Sharon Doty's point, it really emphasizes the whole aspect of not keeping secrets from your parents and of telling children never ever keep a secret from your trusted adult or your parent. As Sharon Doty had talked about, that is something that predators try to do to intervene in that relationship.
All right, thanks Carolee McGrath, and we will certainly be following this story and keeping you updated on findings from the survey. And remember, you can participate through links found at diospringfield.org. And still to come on Reel to Reel, the story of one parish's efforts during the coronavirus lockdown to prepare students to receive their first communion. And tomato, my dad Jimmy Stefanik cooks up some sauce using this summer's bountiful harvest. These stories and more are coming your way next on Reel to Reel.
Oh, my Lord. The Chalice of Salvation, your weekly spiritual connection. My passionate brother Terrence Scanlon, inviting you to take time out of your busy day and join us Sunday morning. We welcome Father Michael Pierce as our Mass presider and celebrate the 28th Sunday in Ordinary Time. The Chalice of Salvation Sunday morning at a special time of 6 a.m. on 22 News, and coming up next on Fox 23 WXXA.
As was the case in all parishes when the pandemic caused an abrupt shutdown in mid-March of the Faith Formation Ministry at St. Cecilia Parish in Wilbraham, the First Communion program had to be delayed. Some students were able to continue learning online, while parents also stepped up in the remote learning process. As David Martin now reports, First Communion weekend finally did take place in late August when 14 children received their first Holy Communion.
Like all parishes across our region, St. Cecilia Parish in Wilbraham had to postpone their normal First Communion last spring, and recently, when it was finally held, it had fewer people than usual attending. Due to social distancing requirements, the parish had to schedule 3 separate First Communion Masses, 2 on Saturday and 1 on Sunday, and the students were only allowed to invite a limited amount of guests. Rosemary Oldred, the Director of Religious Education at St. Cecilia Parish, explained that since students were restricted to bringing 7 guests, the Mass sizes were smaller, but all the important individuals in the children's lives were present. Oldred added the children were not able to participate more in the Mass because of social distancing protocols, so each student awaited his or her moment in the spotlight.
I look forward to the moment when each child goes up and is able to receive the Eucharist, because the look of wonder on their faces really is something special.
The Masses were celebrated by Father John Connors, who became pastor of St. Cecilia on July 1st. Father Connors admitted in his homily that he was a little nervous at experiencing First Communion weekend for the first time in his new parish, but he assured that everyone was prepared to perform with perfection at the Mass.
I think it was an exciting time for the second graders because they had studied all year, in second grade, and typically First Communion's in April or May, and as a result of the delay, they've had to wait. And so they were very excited. There were a lot of photos, and families were excited as well.
Father Connors said parents more concerned about social distancing and safety were given the opportunity to have their children participate in First Communion at a weekday Mass or another Mass as things got better down the road. Oldred said 8 of the 52 students receiving First Communion this year chose that option. Oldred felt encouraged at rehearsal because the children remembered all they had been taught before the COVID crisis shut down churches and faith formation programs, and she was amazed at how prepared they were for First Communion. Oldred said many in the parish have been helpful during this pandemic and are witness of how essential faith is during these difficult times.
It's the most important thing that we've been able to hold on to really since March. And St. Cecilia's has done a good job of trying to keep people engaged as best we can while we were all closed and shut down. And now that we're opening and slowly seeing more and more people come back, I think the most important thing to remember is our faith.
Father Connors told the students they are receiving a great gift in the Eucharist as a reminder that God is always with them and how much He loves them. One student, Caitlin Sheehan, said the challenges of learning this year were worth it to receive First Communion.
I felt really happy going up to receive God.
Cantor for the liturgy was Madison McGrath, a youth choir member accompanied by her mother, Catholic communications reporter Carolee McGrath, whose younger son Joey made his First Communion the day before. Carolee is also Caitlin's religious education teacher. Caitlin was pleased to have her family present at the Mass.
I think it meant a lot to her to be able to be like one of the big kids that gets to go up and receive the Eucharist every Mass, and she has more of an investment in it now that she can be a part of that.
As a parent, Sheehan confirmed that St. Cecilia's religious education teachers are very important role models and find entertaining ways to nurture kids into learning and caring about their faith. She said this weekend was a wonderful way for everyone to be together again and meet their new pastor.
Just because we have to be a little bit apart doesn't mean that we can't still be a community and celebrate our faith together.
Father Connors was grateful that St. Cecilia was able to celebrate First Communion Masses under these circumstances, particularly as a means of encouraging kids to become more engaged in faith formation.
We're looking for as many ways possible to do that creatively, while at the same time maintaining safety requirements. And so we'll be doing that in our religious education program coming up, where it'll be somewhat of a hybrid program to start with. We're also looking at our family liturgies to be a little different than what they have been before. Any way we can to keep the youth and the children connected to the faith.
Father Connors posed for pictures with students and their families after the Mass. He expected that the photos with everyone wearing masks, which is for the protection of the children, will serve as a reminder of an unusual period in parish history when viewing them in decades ahead. For Real to Real, I'm David Martin.
And congratulations to all the First Communion classes across our diocese and their families. Well, one of the good things that I think has come out of the pandemic is that more people than ever seem to be planting gardens. My dad, Jimmy Stefanik, has had one for years now and shares with us how he puts those tomatoes to good use, canning a delicious sauce to enjoy in the coming winter months.
Today I'm making pasta sauce, which requires about 8 pounds of tomatoes and makes 5 pints. The idea of using uniform tomatoes, which will give you an accurate account. This is Mrs. Wage's pasta sauce. Very tasty and spicy. Here we have 8 pounds of tomatoes, right in their prime. Beautiful. This will make 5 pints of pasta sauce.
First, you scald the tomatoes in boiling water for 3 minutes.
I just took the tomatoes out of the hot water and put them in the cold water. Now I'm cutting the heel off and the core and the skin. Now I'm cutting them up in small pieces so that I can render them down into a sauce and get the core out of it. Here's a little core right there. Some of these come out good, some of them you have to tackle a little bit extra.
Now, place the sliced tomatoes in a pot and start to boil.
Smells so good.
This is where Mrs. Wage's pasta sauce mix comes in. Add the pouch to the tomatoes along with 1/4 cup of sugar and simmer for about 25 minutes.
That's actually thickening it up too, which is good. I already put in the sugar 20 minutes ago. It takes a while to render the tomatoes down. We have 18 tomatoes in here rendered down to the pasta sauce. I added the pasta sauce and now I'm ready to put it in jars in the canner. I gotta take the jars out, which are boiling.
Prepare your canning jars according to the manufacturer's directions for sterilizing jars. Next, we will fill the jars with sauce, leaving space for about 1/2 inch from the top. After capping each jar, the sealed jars are then put back into the boiling water for 15 minutes.
The end. That completes the 15 jars out of 27 pounds of tomatoes. These are the last jars of spaghetti sauce I made out of Mrs. Wage's pasta sauce. We added green peppers and basil. Here's a serving suggestion. Brown and drain fat from 1 pound of ground beef and add 1 pint of prepared Mrs. Wage's pasta sauce. Simmer for 20 minutes and cook over spaghetti. And I don't get any wages from Mrs. Wage's.
All we need now is the labels. And I have to say the sauce is really delicious. Mrs. Wage's sure knows how to spice things up. And also, without really knowing it, my dad is a perfect example of taking the Pope's new encyclical message of caring for the earth to heart. And for this week, that's Real to Real. A reminder that the virtual Catholic Life Conference will be held online this week, October 11th to the 17th, and you can still register for free. Head over to iobserve.org for a link and to learn more. And members of the planning committee will be taking part in this weekend's Chalice of Salvation Mass, which will kick off their week-long conference. The Chalice of Salvation will be seen this Sunday morning at the special early time of 6 a.m. And all of us at Catholic Communications want to express our thanks to all who have given so generously to the annual Catholic Mirror Collection in our parishes. Your donation helps put this Catholic magazine into the homes of all the faithful. If you haven't done so already, please consider making your donation to your parish, and thank you in advance. As always, to keep up with all of the latest news on the Catholic Church, both here in the Diocese of Springfield and around the world, check out our news and information site, iobserve.org. Also, you can like us on Facebook at Catholic Communications. I will see you right back here next week at this same time for Real to Real, your window on the world around you. See you then.
Real to Real is a production of the Catholic Communications Corporation, funded in part by the annual Catholic Appeal, and the support of you, our faithful viewers.